says they will always appreciate South Africa's leadership, especially in the fractured global environment.
We've met a bit in the past, and I've been a long admirer of your leadership of South Africa, and now your leadership of the G20. And the world is very much in your hands at a crucial time. And if I may say, from a Canadian perspective, the strength of the ties between our country are great, including down to the level of assistance in natural disasters.
Global attention has turned to the Middle East, where strikes by Israel and Iran have raised the risks of an escalation into a broader regional conflict. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says that a diplomatic solution is of importance.
I reiterated Europe's commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. In this context, Israel has the right to defend itself. Iran is the principal source of regional instability, and we've always been very clear. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We have voiced our strong concerns over Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. A diplomatic solution remains the best way in the long run.
Diplomats say Canada has ditched the idea of a traditional comprehensive joint communique and would issue chair summaries instead, in the hope of containing a diplomatic fallout and maintaining engagement with the US. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And at 11 minutes past 9, we go on to our top story, our top interview today. It is, of course, on the Middle East conflicts, and as we look at the G7 leaders who are gathering in Canada for their annual summit, Human Rights Watch is at the same time calling on them to take bold and concrete action to halt what it describes as ongoing atrocity crimes by Israeli forces in occupied Palestinian territory. The rights group says the world's wealthiest democracies have enabled mass suffering in Gaza by failing to hold Israel accountable, even as famine looms and civilian infrastructure is decimated. To speak about this and what accountability would look like at this critical moment and the fora, we're joined by Omar Shakir, Israel and Palestinian Director of Human Rights Watch. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd just like to start off with that last sentence by my colleague on the report of G7 countries meeting, the fact that a decision has been made that there won't be a joint communique, that there will instead be communication from the various chair sittings. I think that speaks volumes. What do you read into that?
Look, I think the reality here is that you have the United States that's deeply complicit in Israel's ongoing war crimes and other atrocities. And we're at a moment where the world's starting to shift a little bit, at least in the global north. We've seen the United Kingdom, Norway, Australia, New Zealand issue some sanctions against Israeli ministers. The European Union is now reviewing its association agreement with Israel as it has a human rights clause in that trade agreement. The UK has suspended trade talks with Israel. So we're starting to see a bit of a shift, and it's coming precisely because of the gravity of the situation on the ground. We're in the most horrific moment in 20 months of unending, continued war crimes, crimes against humanity, acts of genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. And we're at a very critical juncture. Words are clearly not enough. Even a strongly worded joint communique would not have changed the reality in Gaza. What's needed is action. In many respects, the fate of the people of Gaza hang in the balance. So I think what we're seeing here is obviously divisions, and those divisions are real, but they also cannot be a shield to protect countries from taking the actions they can take individually as smart of smaller collectives, as the examples I listed. Even if it can't happen through the G7, this meeting should be a moment in which countries continue to take action because the stakes going to be higher.
And as you say, words have not been enough because Israel has not been held accountable. And it has been said from several quarters that it's because not only is diplomacy failing, so is multilateralism. But the irony, though, is that words do belie intention, and to the point that you are making as Human Rights Watch, that it's time for the G7 countries to hold Israel accountable. So a joint communique would bind countries and their resolve to ensure that that accountability happens. So is it at the same time acknowledging that you know, they cannot come together even at a multilateral level to bring about some form of accountability? Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, so I'm asking Omar, and just to sum up what I was saying, you were saying words are not enough, but words also belie action. Human Rights Watch is asking the G7 to take what you call bold and concrete action, and that would also happen through a joint communique, through a statement where countries are committing to holding Israel accountable. Does that mean that it is an acknowledgement that multilateralism and diplomacy have failed?
Absolutely. I mean, look, the reality is we're 20 months into this. And we've seen every day reports of mass killing, mass starvation, mass forced displacement taking place against Palestinians. The international community has been tested, and unfortunately, it's been double standards that we've seen in the G7 has been responsible for that. That's been an effective green light for the Israeli government to go forward. So you're absolutely right to say the fact that there can't even be a joint communique that just signals the concern of the G7, that highlights the urgent need for action, that condemns abuses unequivocally, which the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, human rights groups, so many others have been repeating ad nauseum, is a damning indictment on the state of those countries and more generally the leadership of the international community. So I absolutely agree. The point I wanted to make is that given some of the countries who are part of the G7, right, and especially the role of the United States, a joint communique that that would be mealy-mouthed or that would try to embody consensus really isn't enough. We saw the Security Council, the U.S. vetoed a resolution that very much was a balanced text that was reiterating the most basic of calls. So I think states can't use that. The fact that the United States and some other countries continue to be complicit or provide a diplomatic shield to Israel as an excuse for not taking actions bilaterally. We would have welcomed a communique that set out clear actions from the G7. That's what should have happened. The fact that it hasn't can't be an excuse for states not to act in their individual and collective.
And to the point of that, of commitment and enforceability. So we move from words to language, and language to consensus around concepts. And again, we'll look at the international legal instruments that enforce and hold countries to account on some of what you're calling for. And you say that there needs to be an outcry on, as you talk about these terms, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, extermination of forcible displacement, and acts of genocide. These are words, these are language that those who are failing, like the United States, to hold Israel to account, because they say they disagree on it conceptually. So one then asks the question, what then going forward is the role of such important legal instruments like the Geneva Convention, for instance?
Look, I mean, those words we didn't get to lightly. We cover 100 countries around the world, and, those conclusions are the product of painstaking documentation, talking to witnesses and victims, reviewing satellite imagery, studying photos and videos, getting a whole range of accounts. And they are among the most serious crimes that exist under the lexicon of international law. And as you note, I mean, the very fundamentals of not only the Geneva Conventions, but the Genocide Convention, right? I mean, some of the legal instruments that grew out of the ashes of World War II are being literally destroyed in the ashes of Gaza. And so I think what needs to happen here, I mean, and we're not just talking about states taking action out of their own goodwill. States could be liable under the Genocide Convention for failing to act. The trigger for that is not an authoritative determination of genocide by a court. It's the mere risk of it, which the International Court of Justice highlighted back in January of 2024, a year and a half ago. So, these terms are not just a matter of one or two human rights organizations. They've been highlighted at the world's foremost court. They've been highlighted by a range of different governments and UN bodies, and they're the very instruments and mechanisms that the world, especially the Western world, has cited in Ukraine and so many other contexts as the basis for action. So I really think that the international legal system is being tested, and the ramifications of that will go far beyond Israel-Palestine, will affect civilian protection everywhere in the world. So I think there's a really urgent need for action to ensure that the Geneva Conventions and these other conventions still have meaning in this day and age.
Omar Shakir, thank you very much appreciated. Israel and Palestinian Director at Human Rights Watch, just speaking to us about what is needed, what action is needed from G7 leaders as they meet in Canada. So we continue to look at what is happening in the Middle East and talk about what should happen and what the mood is in terms of ensuring accountability and action to protect Palestinians. Joining us now is Sam Kiley, World Affairs Editor with The Independent, who's been closely following the fast escalating confrontation between Israel and Iran. His recent article provides critical insights into the strategic intentions behind Israel's latest strikes on Tehran. All of that and more in just a moment.
Your weekday afternoons have been upgraded by The Upside with me, Tebohole Khuleni, and my partner in crime, Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
And if you want to find out all things luxury, fashion, travel, and art and culture, this is exactly the place to be.
Prepare to be delighted. If it's hip, if it's happening, we are talking about it. We talk about what's now, what's next, and most importantly, what matters most on the African continent and the diaspora.
Do you know what time it is? Catch us every weekday on Channel Africa from 1 to 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Yeah, that's us every weekday afternoon. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa One. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa One. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sepiso Magwetu.
Channel Africa.
It's 23 minutes past 9. We'll continue with more news and developments around the Middle East and the conflict there. Also looking at the tit-for-tat attacks by Israel and Iran and whether or not they are equal in might, and we'll also talk about the situation in Syria. But now, for now, persons with disabilities living in institutions face a heightened risk of being trafficked as their reliance on others offers daily support that can be manipulated. That's according to an expert in disability rights. He was speaking at the United Nations. Eric Rosenthal, who leads Disability Rights International, says persons living with disabilities are isolated from their families and are, of course, easier targets for exploitation. The number of trafficking victims of all types has seen a troubling rise since the advent of COVID-19, with a 25% increase in global detections between 2019 and 2022. UN News' Anna O'Donnell sat with Rosenthal and began by asking him to explain why people with disabilities are being trafficked.
Well, I founded my organization 30 years ago to bring the protections of international human rights law to people with disabilities and to address the areas where the most severe and pervasive abuses take place. And what we have found is that children placed in orphanages, adults in psychiatric facilities, social care homes, group homes, wherever people are segregated from society and cut off from public view, an array of abuses can take place. Their choices are taken away from them, their legal rights are taken away from them, and so exploitation, abuse, and indeed trafficking happens, and it happens on a large scale. There is a massive undercount of children in institutions. We believe it's upwards of 10 million children around the world, and there is no count of adults. So we're talking 10, 20, 30 million adults put away, and whenever people are put away, the trafficking exists. We have documented it on our website. We've got reports from 30 countries or so where we've documented these issues. The U.S. government's Trafficking in Persons report identified institutionalization as an inherent vulnerability marker for trafficking. So the documentation has been out there and it's been recognized, and we've just got to make sure that the link is made more often between trafficking and institutionalization of children and adults.
You're working at the forefront of this issue, but trafficking is often overlooked in disability advocacy, and within anti-trafficking, disability is often overlooked. Could you explain why you think that is, why that connection isn't made as often as it should be?
Right. Well, when people are locked up, orphanages, you think, oh, orphanages are great places because kids don't have parents. They're safe there. When people are identified as mentally ill, they assume that they're there for their own safety. They're there for their protection. How could mentally ill people live in the community? And so institutionalization and orphanages, they're normalized because people think that they're there for their own benefit. And it never occurs to people that, number one, kids are only safe when they're with their families. Most kids in orphanages have families. They're there because of disability or poverty. Their parents love them and want to be with them, but can't because of the lack of support. People with a diagnosis of mental illness can live. We know, all the evidence shows they can live in the community and thrive. But when they're locked up, abuse, torture, exploitation, trafficking are going to. So it's the patina of beneficence that's the problem. And that's what's so key about disability rights. It says you have a right to be part of society. You have a right to make your own choices. And breaking through this business of we're doing it to protect you, to show that actually those people are not being protected. They're being abused, exploited, and trafficked. And that's the word we're trying to get out.
What would you tell survivors in the disability community and those institutionalized as we speak about this conference and about your work and its impact?
The survivors take enormous hope in getting this recognition from the United Nations. We are so pleased that the Special Rapporteur Hagras is bringing attention to this issue, because I've worked very closely with those survivors. They are forgotten. They are overlooked. The world needs to know. And as I gave the example of Riccardo Costelecchi, who risked his life. He was continually raped, exploited in a psychiatric facility, and he risked his life to speak out. He is no longer with it. I want to honor those survivors, the people who have died speaking out to expose this. We have to support them, and in their memory and in their honor, we all have to take action to say, no, we can't allow this to continue.
16% of displaced people globally are disabled. How do disability and displacement contribute to this nexus of disability and trafficking?
Yes, we work very much on displacement. We have a big program in Ukraine where there's an enormous number of internally displaced people. On our website, a report, Left Behind in the War, about displaced children with disabilities. As the special rapporteur said, when there's a war, the non-disabled run. They go to safety. People with disabilities left behind. Ukraine, for example, is a country that had 100,000 children in institutions before the war. The children with disabilities get dumped into those facilities when everyone else runs. So they're even more overcrowded and in a very dangerous situation. On our website, we have examples from Guatemala, Ukraine, and Kenya. We have the documentation on infanticide in Kenya, the Federico Mora Psychiatric Facility in Guatemala, the Hogar Seguro. At the Hogar Seguro Orphanage in Guatemala, girls who were being systematically trafficked broke out, were locked up. 41 girls were burned to death for protesting their own trafficking, and we are representing them before the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. It's so important. So that case is one of the cases that we are working on. Our work in Ukraine, all the documentation, we are sitting on mounds of documentation. There are extensive documentation from dozens of countries. The problem is not documentation. The problem is the courage to take action to end the abuses.
What would you say, as someone who's been on the field, been with survivors, whether they're migrants in Ukraine or in institutions in the U.S., what solutions have you looked at and thought have been productive? What solutions do you think people should be advocating for?
Our organization specializes in not just documentation, but litigation using legal systems. And so support for litigation, it may be a long-term solution, but it really is a way of systemically addressing. Changing laws, policies are important. But there is also no substitute for tiny amounts of money going to support the advocacy, helping parents keep their kids so that they don't have to put them in institutions, peer support. On a small scale, stopping children from being separated from their parents is probably the best investment that could possibly be made. I mean, in countries in Kenya, we found out that more than 50% of children, families who have kids with disabilities, were told by their community to let their children die or to kill them because of a fear of what the stigma of having disability in the community. Infanticide is common. We can't let that happen. People with disabilities are humans. Children with disabilities are humans. And if I were speaking to donors supporting grassroots advocacy by people with disabilities, helping parents keep their children who they love rather than giving them up to an institution is the fastest way to save large numbers of lives.
And that there is Eric Rosenthal, who leads Disability Rights International, speaking to Anna O'Donnell on UN News. And that brings the time to 28 minutes to 10. Now, let's continue with our look at what's happening in the Middle East. We're joined now by Dr. Ibrahim Al-Marashi, Associate Professor of Middle East History at California State University, San Marcos. He's a leading voice on the politics and history of the region. And today he helps us speak about the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. What is this conflict that we're seeing? What does it mean, particularly for the wider Middle East? A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And it's all about framing, isn't it? So how would you frame what is happening now between Israel and Iran and the root causes of what is happening today?
This is the first conventional war between two states, between Israel and Iran, since 1973. Since 1973, two states, Israel and another, going to war. The last war was Egypt and Syria. So this has the potential of becoming a major conventional conflict in the region.
So when you say a conventional conflict, can you just expand a little bit more on that?
Sure. Most of the conflicts with Israel since the 1973 war were with non-state actors. They were the Palestine Liberation Organization in Lebanon fighting off an Israeli invasion in 1982. Hezbollah emerged in response to Israel's invasion. It's been groups like Hamas, the Houthis are all violent non-state actors that Israel has engaged with. This is an all-out war where Israel is trying to eliminate standing generals of a state and almost induced regime change. So it's an entirely different conflict for the region.
And interestingly, as you say that, Israel, though, has vehemently denied trying to effect regime change. So if it's not its actions, what could they result in? And would it be anything akin to regime change?
I think they took a step back, but I mean, without a doubt, they're hoping that showing the government in power, if it's targeted and weak, I think they're hoping for the populace to rise up. In fact, it's had the opposite effect. In 1980, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, and the people rallied behind Ayatollah Khomeini, who was at that time in battling other revolutionary factions. It consolidated Khomeini's position. And the current government has been fighting protests since 2022 when an Iranian woman was killed by the police. It's the people have problems with the government due to the sanctions, the economy, but there's also when a foreign country violates Iranian sovereignty, it tends to have the other effect. The Iranians might rally behind the nation, not necessarily the regime, but it's a far cry from inducing regime change.
And it's interesting that you say Iran might rally behind the nation, but not the regime. So let's talk about then Iran's relationship or ties with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, and the action that Israel is taking now. Could it be described as the same motivation?
In terms of, let me just say the Iranian population has always thought of why should the government support Hezbollah and Houthis to the detriment of investing in the Iranian economy. I think now it's going to have the opposite effect. In other words, the Hezbollah and Houthis now might be seen as the only way Iran would have of retaliating. It might recalculate the Iranian people's position vis-a-vis the Iranian government support of these proxy groups. It's still too early to tell, but it's definitely interesting to look back in history and how whenever a foreign intervention happened in Iranian history, it usually leads to the people rallying behind the incumbent leadership.
And speaking of rallying behind and means of expressions of whether ideologically or not, what is then being broadcast, the information that is being put out there. We've seen Israel, attack a live broadcast, or should I say Iranian state media studio during a live broadcast of what exactly is happening. So is there an understanding from Israel that Iran's actions are largely supported by Iranians, or is it ready to make a point about the nuclear military might?
I think it's both. It is just to show no target is invulnerable and perhaps disrupt the state's ability to communicate with the masses. Yet at the end of the day, even if the state broadcaster might not have had much credibility with the Iranian population, it definitely, I think, would also backfire in that it's just another reminder of how Israel is violating Iranian sovereignty.
And speaking of Iranian sovereignty, we're hearing reports now that Iran's foreign minister says a parliament is preparing a bill to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty. This at the same time where the U.S. President Donald Trump is saying that, it's time for a deal, but sometimes they may just have to fight it out. What are your thoughts on that?
Let's remember that Iran had signed a deal in 2015. It was Trump who withdrew from that deal in 2018. Had he not withdrawn from that deal, we would have had 10 years to see the effects of this treaty. And so, for Trump to talk about re-entering the deal with them, he needs to be reminded this is a war of his making. So if Iran were to withdraw from the NPT, I would put the blame solely at Trump's legacy back in 2018.
And what about the nuclear capabilities of both? There are some who are saying that even though Iran's catchment may be larger, but it would seem that Israel has more firepower. And how much does that matter? And also from a moral standpoint, with these counterattacks that we're seeing between the two. I mean, Iran warning people who live anywhere near nuclear facilities or armaments facilities, civilians in particularly, to evacuate the area because it's already accused Israel of targeting civilian occupied areas.
So, I mean, it's, what's happening is hard to determine in terms of what ultimate damage is being done to these nuclear facilities. But regardless, there is always the worry of potential fallout. Israel has launched raids on nuclear facilities in Iraq in 1991 and in Syria in 2017. And in both of those cases, there wasn't radioactive fallout. In these cases, not only is there the potential of radioactive fallout, it's the following. These weapons are so massive, bunker-busting bombs, and so indiscriminate that, yes, absolutely, they have the possibility of not only affecting civilians, but at the same time, they're targeting residential apartments with generals inside of them or the TV studio. So, I think it's these attacks from the air are indiscriminate in their nature.
And just finally, the sophistication of the machinery, the intelligence, the data that is being used, because we see Israel reportedly having the ability to not only track Israel's skies, but also to track in real time individual top officials, the ability to strike them individually in real time. Just how devastating could this latest conflict be?
Well, definitely Iran has been infiltrated. If we go back, Iranian nuclear scientists have been routinely assassinated. So without a doubt, Israeli intelligence has infiltrated Iranian society. It had been able to conduct sophisticated assassinations of nuclear scientists for years now. So this is, it is a testament that this is a major intelligence failure on behalf of the Iranian state. The inability to, prevent, not only the infiltration of Iranian soil, but there must be, sophisticated satellite intelligence, perhaps drone intelligence, that is allowing for these real-time targeting efforts.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights with us, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Marashi, Associate Professor of Middle East History at California State University's San Marcos. Much appreciated.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Hawa wa Afrika Kusini wenye asili ya kizungu ambao wamepewa ukimbizi huko nchini Marekani. Je, nini chanzo cha wao kuomba ukimbizi nchini Marekani?
Wenyewe hawajaomba ukimbizi. Kuna shirika fulani inaitwa AfriForum, shirika mbili za wazungu ambao wanatetea haki ya wazungu hapa, AfriForum na Solidarity. Hao walienda Marekani kufanya kampeni kusema kwamba wazungu wananyanyaswa hapa Afrika Kusini, na walivyofanya hiyo kampeni, serikali iweze kuwafuatilia kujua nini ambacho mnasema kwamba mnanyanyaswa.
Kuna namna ya wao kwamba wamepoteza uraia wa Afrika Kusini, na je, endapo Trump akamaliza muda wake madarakani, uhalali wao wa kuishi nchini Marekani ukoje?
Itakuwa vigumu, kifupi itakuwa vigumu wenyewe kupoteza uraia wao.
Darubini ya Afrika 11 kamili hadi 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Your weekday afternoons have been upgraded by The Upside with me, Tebohole Khuleni, and my partner in crime, Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
And if you want to find out all things luxury, fashion, travel, and arts and culture, this is exactly the place to be.
Prepare to be delighted. If it's hip, if it's happening, we are talking about it. We talk about what's now, what's next, and most importantly, what matters most on the African continent and the diaspora.
Do you know what time it is? Catch us every weekday on Channel Africa from 1 to 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Yeah, that's us every weekday afternoon.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
It's 15 minutes of the final minutes of Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. So we talk about the latest developments in Nigeria now as the President Bola Tinubu posthumously pardoned the Ogon 9, a group of environmental activists, among them the late Ken Saro-Wiwa, the author, who were executed by a military regime nearly 3 decades ago for protesting around the oil pollution in the Niger Delta. But the move has, of course, been met with sharp criticism from the Ogon leaders, who say a mere pardon falls far short of justice. To speak about the reaction from the community and what this moment means, particularly on the anniversary of their deaths, the wider struggle in the Niger Delta, we speak now from Nigeria to Celestine Akpobari, coordinator of the Ogon Solidarity Forum. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, viewers and listeners all over Africa.
So we see that the spokesperson in the presidency of President Tinubu has hit back, saying that, what the president has done is normal, to use the term, and that if you want him to do far greater than what he's done, and that is a pardon, that perhaps you should make a motivation for that. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think they are playing games. The government are playing games, and we are too smart for those games that they are playing. Because whenever government want to do something evil, they know what to do. Why is it that it's difficult for them to drag their foot and behave as if they don't know anything when something good that they are supposed to do is around the corner? They dance around, and we see through their games. Because pardon can only be granted to one that committed an offense, that committed a crime. In this case, it is the government of Nigeria and the oil companies that committed crimes against the Ogoni people and the Ogoni environment. The military occupied our land and killed over 2,000 persons in cold blood. They committed genocide in our land. They knew what to do then to send soldiers to Ogoni land. They knew what to do then to set up a military tribunal that sentenced Ken to death through a kangaroo trial. They knew what to do when there was oil and there was blood, and they chose oil over blood, a costly blood, one of the best Nigerians that ever lived. They knew what to do when they want to do evil. It is the government of Nigeria that deserve apology from Ogoni people. We are the people that will forgive them for killing us, for doing nothing, only to ask that come and clean our environment. You kill us. So they committed a crime against Ogoni. Ogoni will grant them pardon. Ogoni will give them forgiving them when the time is ripe. The time is not ripe yet because they are not remorse about what the crime they committed against us.
And let's talk about that, because what the presidency is saying, that if you seek exoneration as a people, and what the president has done is pardoning, and obviously what you're saying is that it doesn't make sense because you can't pardon somebody who is innocent. But does this say to the people of Ogoni that what was done by a military regime then is very much in line with what a so-called democratic civilian government, agrees with?
Well, the president of Nigeria is one of the most powerful presidents in the world. He has so much power. He's a president and commander-in-chief. He's also a military person in civilian uniform. So what I expected Mr. President to do, if he has no power to exonerate, was to set up a judicial panel of inquiry to do a review of the kangaroo trial, to look at the trial of Justice Alta, and do a review of what happened. How the lawyers of Ken Saro-Wiwa were chased out of the tribunal. All those things, they're supposed to look at it, and I know that such a panel will recommend exoneration. And the Attorney General of the government of Nigeria can advise them on what to do, either by giving approval to recommendations of such panel of inquiry. And I know they would have recommended exoneration. I also would have loved Mr. President to set up another panel to look at the military occupation of Ogoni land. How the military occupied our land. Because those that committed genocide in Ogoni are walking freely on the streets of Nigeria. It shouldn't be. And luckily, this president was in the trenches with our leaders. He is a comrade, and he knew what happened. So
why do you think the pardon now, and what is it meant to achieve? Because you say when the government wants to do something, it does it. Is that what you see as happening now, that the pardons are a gateway into something nefarious?
Yes, they are targeting Ogoni oil. You know, Ogoni oil has been in the soil since 1993. So about 32 years or 33 years now, and it's been 30 years after the death of Ken Saro-Wiwa, after the murder of Ken Saro-Wiwa, the oil has remained for 30. But before Ken was murdered, the oil has been in the soil for about 3 years. So about 33 years now. And the president has promised the world that he was going to ramp up oil production to 2 million barrels. And Ogoni oil is one of the targets. So that's why they are dancing the way they are dancing. We know their dance steps. They couldn't have just done this for nothing, because they will not be born again.
But
there are a lot of issues that you're going to Bill of Rights that they have not even looked at.
Do you then foresee the government pushing ahead, and I mean, whether the people of Ogoni like it or not, with drilling in the Niger Delta? And do you think a company like Shell, which has been drawing oil in Nigeria for decades, would be the same company that would be invited, irrespective of whatever Shell company is using, pardon the pun, to draw out that oil?
Shell has set up another company in the name of Renaissance. So, because they claim that they are divesting, because they are dirty. The company is dirty. Every community is calling their name. Every community is taking them to court. In all the courts in Europe, in the UK and the Hague, everywhere, Shell is smelling because of their criminal activities in the Niger Delta. So they are so dirty that nobody wants to see Shell. So they have now metamorphosed into a company called Renaissance. Because I say so because if you are buying something from me, I should not borrow you money to buy something from me. Because when Renaissance was buying this asset from Shell, Shell borrowed them money. And we heard that some of the staff of Shell are with the Renaissance that have taken over the assets of Shell. So invariably, it's a Renaissance that will be taking the assets. So it is Shell, but they are wearing a different face. But Shell is inside the body. Then the face is different, like the hand of Esau and the voice of Jacob. And that is what we are going to likely see, but it's going to be a big fight. It's not going to be easy because there is blood in the oil in Ogoni. There is blood, thick blood, that has not been cleaned out. There is blood. The government must accept that they committed crime against Ogoni people.
And
the government must address the issues that the Ogoni people raised in the Bill of Rights.
And I'm just having that visual image. You say there's, blood on the ground in the oil. So there's pollution in its environmental sense. But I also want to talk about the metaphorical blood in the oil, as in the corruption. If you could just speak to us about the state of that, the state of pollution, and what government has done to clean up the environment for the people of Ogoni, so that they can live on land that is sustainable, not only to be able to grow whatever agricultural means there are to sustain them, but also the environment in terms of corruption, which for years we've been hearing that nothing has changed.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Ogoni used to be a food basket in the Niger Delta. I used to follow my mother to the farm, and we just uproot 2 heads of cassava, our staple food, and we are gone. Today, you can uproot 1 hectare and you won't get 1 basin of cassava, our staple food, because the land has become dead. The fishermen used to go to the river like 3 times a day to get fish to sell and make money. Today, even if the fish is an iron fish, it will not survive in the river of Ogoni because of pollution. Because the pipelines that were laid in the 60s, about 6 decades today, they are old and aged. They are rusty. And these guys are always after profit. They are not doing routine checks. So these things are leaking profusely into our river, into our farmlands, everywhere, into our homes. And they don't care because they're only mindful of their profit. And of course, the government of Nigeria, through the Land Use Act, has said that every land in Nigeria, indigenous land, belongs to the government. So they just go to London, sign signature, collect money from owners of the oil well and direct them where the oil well is, whether it is in a school premises, whether it is in a graveyard of our father, whether it is on our farm, newly cultivated farm, they don't care. They just send the military, escort them, and they bulldoze their farm and lay their pipeline and take their oil. That's the only thing. All the oil well in the Niger Delta, I can tell you that about 99% of the oil well in the Niger Delta, they are owned by people who are not Niger Deltans, people who will not come to Niger Delta forever. The same thing happening in South Africa concerning the farms. I'm an apostle of Julius Malema. I listen to him all the time. And the same thing you guys are suffering there is what we are suffering here. And all the money that are stolen from our land are not used for the development of our communities. They are rather used for the development of Abuja. They steal all the money. Our children can't go to school unless we send them to school with our money. The public school system has been destroyed. There's no community you can turn on the tap. And through our struggle, the United Nations, UNEP, Environment Program came to conduct environmental audit of Ogoni and confirmed that our land was dead, that we were drinking water 900 times worse than level recommended by World Health Organization. That there is benzene, a cancer-causing carcinogen in the water we drink, and they are not caring about it. So they just kickstarted the cleanup, and now you want to reopen the oil well again. It is unacceptable. You can't open the tap and mop the floor at the same time.
Just very briefly, I want to end with this, Mr. Akbori. You speak about Julius Malema, you speak about the youth, and today is Youth Day here in South Africa. It's Youth Month, and I want to talk about the legacy of the Ogoni 9. What can the youth of Ogoniland do to keep that flame alight, to protest against subjugation, not only of the land and the export earnings from it that doesn't reach the community, but also from the injustice, as you say, of the killings of and now granting pardon for crimes that were not committed?
Yes, our leaders were very transparent. You know, it's not easy to keep the oil in the soil 30 years after the execution of our leaders. Because every new day, the government want to take our oil. Because our oil is not in the creek. Our oil is in school premises, in farms, in family compounds. Our oil is very costly. They call it Bonnie Light, very costly in the international market. And they want it every day. So our leaders were very transparent. They have integrity. And that's why we are willing to take the risks we have taken to preserve their legacy and to ask that their name be cleared of murder.
Right.
So, so the young people must learn how to be transparent, how to be clean, how not to be corrupt, how to lead with open hands. See me. You don't have anywhere you hide anything. You are open. Our leaders were very open to us, and we are willing to pay any price.
All right. I thank you so much. I thank you so much, really do, Celestine Apobari, coordinator of the Ogoni Solidarity Forum, speaking about their perspective on President Tinubu's posthumous pardon of the Ogoni 9 and their rejection of it. That's how we come to an end on Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa. Do stay with us. Enjoy the rest of your viewing and your listening. As up next, Sheila Ndukumana with Hotlines. From us, it's good night for now.
Hotlines bring you fresh perspectives about love,